Good Tuesday morning of the fifth week of Easter. And watch how they move. In those days, some Jews from Antioch and Iconium arrived and won over the crowds. They stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing he was dead. But when the disciples gathered around him, he got up and he entered the city. On the following day, he left with Barnabas for Derbe. Keeps on the move, you see. After they had proclaimed the good news to that city and made a considerable number of disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch. They strengthened the spirits of the disciples and exhorted them to persevere in the faith, saying, "It's necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." They appointed presbyters for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting commended them to the Lord, in whom they had put their faith. Then they traveled through Pisidia and Pamphylia, reached Pamphylia, and after proclaiming the word at Perga, they went down to Attalia. From there they sailed to Antioch. Boy, they're on the move, aren't they? Where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work they had now accomplished. And when they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. He spent no little time with the disciples. That's neat, isn't it? See them moving? I think we're there. I know I beat it to death, okay? But I'm excited by this thought. Whatever it's worth, I'm sharing it with you, and I don't beat it to death, okay? But I know I said it so many times over the past 3 or 4 weeks or more months. And that is, I think we're in the second apostolic age. And now we're moving, as we move in deeper into Africa, but especially into Asia, that vast community of peoples. And I think it will have a similar effect on the church, that the preaching of Paul and Barnabas, as they go into these other communities and they engage the faith with them, they also are engaged by them. They're learning as they go. They're learning, they're as it were, globalizing. You could call it Mediterraneanizing. I don't know the right word for it. That's what's going to happen now. The Chinese, the Indians, Chinese, those great peoples of the East, and let alone Africa, are not going to become little European Americans in their faith. They are going to be Chinese, Indian, whatever that culture may be. And that will also affect the formulation and the belief of the faith. Let's say the expression of the faith. I don't know how to say that right. But faith plants itself within a culture. It affects the culture, but is affected also by the culture. So the Chinese are not going to think the faith and live the faith in the same way, let's say, as an American. There will be a Chinese and Asian nuance that'll be significant and beautiful and enriching. You see? That's so important. I don't beat it to death, but I don't care. I think it's true. We're the greatest age of the church since the 3rd, 4th century, 5th century. Since the Romanization of the church, it's now the globalization of the church, of Christianity. Our great-grandchildren are going to see something phenomenal, in my view, because it's going to happen with rapidity. And the reason is we have such access through the media. My Lord. You could turn your TV on, watch a soccer game in China. You know what I'm saying? Immediately being played, some kind of world event, whatever. You get what I'm saying. The word is going to get preached in multiple media, through multiple media, and very much present. And I believe, too, to be honest about it, it's going to be the blood of the martyrs. Maybe be the preachers, maybe the recipients. I'm reminded, I told you this last week, of today happens to be the 25th, okay, to whatever, because I just want to say it, all right? That's when I'm making these videos. Constantine Leach was a Passionist in China who died this day, died of malaria, or I don't remember what took his life, 1929. The day before, 3 of my Passionist brothers were shot to death in 1929. They're martyrs. Their blood is still in their bones are still in the land. They're still in China. They went there in 1929. You see? The church was globalized even then. We were invited by the church to go to China, and we went. In fact, that was the best period of the recruiting of my own order. They were coming through the door. Why? These young guys, 18, 19, joining the order, wanted to go to China. They wanted the adventure. And 4 of them are buried there. I knew some of the men that had been imprisoned there, both by the Japanese and the Chinese, who eventually were released in the late 50s, maybe even early. No, it was the late 50s. And some were stationed in the houses that I lived in, New York and in Union City, New Jersey. And some moved on from there. The younger of those men moved on to the Philippines and became missionaries in the Philippines, built our order there. It was a really, I told you this already, an honor in my life that I was able to live daily with some of these great men. I told you the story of what Paul Ubinger, little pipsqueak. I asked him if he ever wanted to go back to China. And I remember I told you this. He said, I would walk back if I could. That's how much they weren't afraid. They got kicked out. They wouldn't have left. And I believe, honestly, they'd have faced martyrdom without blinking an eye. Without blinking an eye. Someday we will be back there, my order. And we will visit the graves of my Passionist brothers that are dead there and rebuild the order. I believe that. Just the way Paul and Barnabas are doing here. You can't, death, you can, what I'm trying to, you can martyr the saints, but you can't kill them. That is what I'm getting at, is they'll be alive. They're alive in the very dirt in which their blood is present. The world got changed by the martyrs. It's still going to be changed by the martyrs. And I believe my Passionist community, not in my lifetime, I'm old, I'm 83 years old, will rebuild itself. I actually believe that. We'll rebuild ourselves in Asia, as I think much of the church will. And I believe we specifically, Passionists, will rebuild ourselves in China, where we have our brothers buried. Their blood is in that soil. They were shot to death. And Constantine died of disease. He's in that ground. He makes that ground sacred. See? We're going to go back there. And we're going to evangelize there. And we will be welcomed. The great-great-grandchildren will see once again the Passionist habit. We'll see the Passionist habit. And maybe in the depths of the cultural memory, they will remember the cultural memory. Right? You can't stop the church. The church is the energy of the Spirit. And I think of that. You think you can martyr, you can shoot them and get rid of them. Yeah, go ahead. And then 1,000 more will follow. And they'll follow and willing to sacrifice in the spirit of the man who died, in the spirit of Christ crucified. I don't know if I'm making sense to you or not. I've been thinking about the 3 guys that got shot to death, and then Constantine Leach. I don't know. I remember their pictures on the wall in Pittsburgh when I was a novice 62 years ago. 62 years ago. 61, 62 years ago. The portrait of holiness. Not piety, but the holiness of blood. They shed their blood. Not because they shed their blood because they were there to bring Christ to the world, to that world. Maybe the vehicle was they couldn't speak Chinese well enough, and that got them killed. Nonetheless, they were there, and their blood is in the ground, and the faith will come back there again. And that faith will be preached by men and sisters, nuns, wearing the Passionist habit. I believe that, actually. And out of their death will come the graces to preach the gospel, to preach a crucified Christ to those people. I believe that. Yeah, I do.